This episode of The Young Turks is brought to you by the National Fight Against Drunk Driving. Over the limit, under arrest. Who wants to spend the holidays in jail? Who? No one.
A neurologist in Britain scanned the brains of 90 students in Britain and also 2 British parliamentarians. And he wanted to find differences in the brains of conservatives versus the brains of liberals. And, you know, he didn't really expect to find a major difference, but he did. So what he found was this. He found that conservatives' brains have larger amygdalas than the brains of liberals. Amygdalas are responsible for fear and other primitive emotions. At the same time, conservatives' brains are also found to have a smaller anterior cingulate, and that's the part of the brain that's responsible for courage and optimism.
Right. So first of all, you conservatives are thick-headed dolts. Hold on, how thick-headed does that sound? All right, again, when in this study, it's only 90 students in that one college. It's 2 British parliamentarians. It's not nearly enough. It's just the beginning of looking into this to see if that holds up in other places.
Right.
Again, surprising how much it held up, even in this very small test initially. And on the other hand, it jives with like 88 other studies we've covered on the show, where emotions drive your politics more than logic does, right? Mm-hmm. More than your political ideology does necessarily, or your emotions drive your political ideology. So, and in those different studies, the one factor that you see over and over that's prevalent for conservatives is fear. And God, as you see it, play out in American politics with conservatives who are like, oh my God, the terrorists are coming, we gotta torture them, oh my God, they're gonna attack us. And constantly, the Republican politicians not just running on fear of terrorists or attacks, but a fear of the other. It was blacks, it was women, now it's gays, it's conservative 101. So in that sense, at least the study seems to make sense with what we see in the real world.
Right. And what's interesting is what convinced this neurologist to do the brain scans in the first place. So apparently he was having an interview with the BBC 4's Today Show. And they were talking about the differences with conservatives and liberals. And the host of the show joked, you should do brain scans to see if they have differences in brain structure. And the neurologist was like, maybe that's a good idea. So he actually did it, not expecting to find any differences, and then he did find differences. And so now the host of that show is saying, well, maybe you should scan the brains of people in Parliament right now so we could figure out whether or not they're being honest when they're saying they're liberals or whether they're being conservatives. I love that.
Yeah, I don't want to start scanning people's brains to decide which, direction they're secretly going in. But listen, the other thing that makes sense to me is, for example, people wonder, like, why are there more conservatives in smaller towns throughout the country, in the South, Midwest, whatever it might be, although Midwest is becoming more and more liberal. And then there are more liberals, generally speaking, in California, New York, the coast, etc. Well, I think part of that is explained in this as well, and again, within the context of other things that we've covered, which is that liberals might be more, according to this, courageous and optimistic, meaning like, hey, I'm willing to leave my small town and go to New York and take a chance, or I'm open to new ideas, I'm open to change, I'm open to, not just politically, but in my life, right? So that's why you wind up getting the liberals on the coast, and conservatives, who maybe because of their brain structure, we don't know, we'll have to do more tests on it, say, oh, no, I don't want to go to those places, I'm scared, I don't like change, I just want to stay here with my thick-headed friends.
Steve, you had something to say?
Yeah, actually, sample size of 97 is not too small. For most studies, if you have a representative sample where n equals the sample size, if it's above 25, you can get a good, reliable study. The more important factor here is whether the study was a blind study. when this neurologist was scanning these brains, did he know that it was supposed to be a conservative's brain or a liberal's brain? Because that may influence what he quote unquote finds. He's like, it's a conservative brain, so wow, look how big that amygdala is.
Right.
By the way, Cenk's amygdala used to be a lot larger. Now
That's
it's
what
shrunken.
I hear. That's what Dave Kohler claims continuously while Cenk is hosting MSNBC.
Right. Well, I went from being a conservative to a lib because I had some trauma to my amygdala. And it went, and it shrunk up a little bit, and I was like, oh my God, Reagan was evil.
No, but what's interesting is this neurologist is also wondering what came first, the chicken or the egg. So are we born with large amygdalas, or does our political affiliation change the structure of our brain? That's another question that he's posing, which I think is fascinating.
Yeah, I'm very dubious about that. Well, like if you're a conservative, your amygdala starts like bunkering down. And it's like, hold on. And then it starts to expand, and then the other part of the brain starts to shrink, going, I know brains change throughout our lifetime, but that seems a bit much to me.
Right.
And by the way, now that we've dedicated apparently this episode of the Young Turks to methodology, I think the bigger problem with the methodology is that they were almost all University College London students.
Right, yes, they were.
Anna, you know what's a disastrous idea?
Drinking and driving?
Bingo. How'd you know?
What?
Look, there's a number of reasons why, right? Obviously. Number one, if you get arrested, disaster on top of disaster.
If you do get caught drunk driving, it'll cost you thousands of dollars.
But put all that aside, what's much more important is if you wind up hurting somebody, you're never going to forgive yourself. That's the worst possible thing you could do. And you think like, oh, if I take a cab, it costs a lot of money. I know, believe me, you know me, I'm cheap, right? But I always think like, what if something went wrong, and my whole life I'd be thinking, why didn't I just take the cab? You don't have to go to any website, and you don't have to enter a TYT promo code.
Just do not get behind the wheel after you've been drinking.
Happy holidays.